cutting through the quiet of the night. Inside a small nurse's room, silence filled the space where duty had replaced dreams. Her name was Haya. There was always a gentle light in her eyes, as if even in darkness, she still believed in hope. Haya was calm, sincere, and humble. She had spent her youth within the white walls of that hospital, caring for strangers more than herself. She never complained, never hid her smile, and carried the world's pain in her heart as if it were her own. One rainy night, an emergency patient was brought in. The doctors looked worried. He was around 30, handsome but frail, his skin pale, his breathing weak. When the test results came back, everyone fell silent. Both of his kidneys were failing. Haya glanced at the file and then at the man lying helplessly on the bed. His name was Arsalan. He had no visitors, no family, no friends. Just loneliness and pain. Haya quietly checked his blood pressure and asked softly, "Are you in pain?" He smiled faintly and said, "Only the pain of living. The rest I've learned to endure." That single sentence pierced her heart. Over the next few days, Haya found herself drawn to him. She brought him his medicine, checked on him often, and sometimes made him smile with her gentle humor. "How are you feeling today?" she would ask. Arsalan would reply, "If you keep visiting me, maybe I'll get better sooner." She would blush, hiding a small smile she didn't quite understand. But his condition grew worse. The doctors said there was no hope without a kidney donor, and there was no one left to help. That night, Haya couldn't sleep. She searched patient records for a possible donor, but found nothing. Then, before dawn, she made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, she walked into the doctor's office and said calmly, "I want to donate my kidney." The doctor was stunned. "Haya, do you understand the risk?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. But if he dies, I don't think my soul will ever find peace again." The tests matched. The surgery was long and dangerous, but she never hesitated. As the anesthesia began to pull her into darkness, she whispered a silent prayer. "Dear God, let him live, even if it costs me part of my life." Arsalan survived. When he finally woke up days later, the first face he saw was Haya's, pale, weak, but smiling. When he learned what she had done, he couldn't hold back his tears. "You risked your life for me?" he asked. Haya replied softly, "Maybe that was my destiny, to become someone's breath." Time passed, and Arsalan recovered fully. When he left the hospital, he said, "I can't thank you enough. I owe you my life." Weeks later, he returned with a proposal. "Haya," he said, "I don't just owe you gratitude. I owe you love. Will you marry me?" Haya hesitated for a moment, then smiled. She didn't see it as love. She saw it as a new beginning. Their wedding was small but filled with sincerity. They moved into a tiny apartment, simple yet warm. Arsalan started a small business, and Haya left nursing to care for their home. A year later, their daughter was born, Maham. Haya poured every ounce of her love into her child. She believed her sacrifices had finally found purpose. But fate, as always, had other plans. At first, their little world was full of laughter. Arsalan would play with Maham while Haya cooked in their small kitchen, humming softly to herself. She often thought, maybe life finally decided to be kind. But happiness, like fragile glass, rarely lasts forever. Arsalan's business started to crumble. Financial stress crept into their home like an invisible storm. He became distant, staying out late, avoiding conversations, and slowly losing the warmth that once made Haya feel safe. One evening, while folding his laundry, Haya found messages on his phone, messages from another woman. Her hands trembled as she read them, her heart breaking with every word. That night, she didn't cry or scream. She simply sat beside her sleeping daughter, tears falling silently onto Maham's tiny hand. When Arsalan came home, she confronted him. "Is this true?" she asked quietly. He avoided her eyes. "You don't understand, Haya. Life isn't a hospital rulebook. People change." Then he walked away, leaving behind silence heavier than any argument. The next morning, he was gone, no goodbye, no apology. Just emptiness. Haya was left with nothing but her child and her courage. She returned to the hospital where it all began, this time not as the young nurse full of dreams, but as a mother fighting for survival. She worked double shifts, took extra patients, and spent nights in the staff room, too tired to go home. She often went hungry, but always made sure Maham had enough to eat. Years passed. Maham grew up watching her mother fight the world with quiet strength. "Mom," she'd say, "why do you work so much?" Haya would smile and reply, "Because kindness is the only thing that never runs out." One day, the hospital assigned Haya to care for a private patient, a young businessman named Rehan, injured in an accident. He was wealthy, impatient, and used to commanding people around. But something about Haya's calm presence silenced him. She didn't treat him like a client. She treated him like a human being. Days turned into weeks. Rehan began to look forward to her visits. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the window, he said, "You have something special, Haya. It's like your heart carries light for everyone else." Haya smiled faintly and said, "Light only comes from darkness, and I've seen plenty of that." After he recovered, Rehan asked her to join his company. His family ran a medical supply business, and he wanted her to lead the health management division. At first, Haya refused, but then she thought of Maham and the chance for a better future. She accepted. Over time, her honesty and hard work transformed the company. She wasn't just an employee, she became the reason it thrived. Her ideas brought success, and soon, people in the medical field began to recognize her name. Years later, when she received her first big paycheck, she set a portion aside for Maham's education fund. She handed her the receipt and said, "This is your foundation, my love. Build your life stronger than mine." Rehan often told her, "Haya, you're the reason this company stands tall. You've turned pain into power." But she would only smile, never taking credit. She had stopped believing in promises long ago. Time moved forward. Maham entered university to study nursing, inspired by her mother's story. One afternoon, while checking the patient list at the company clinic, Haya froze. Her hands trembled. The name on the file read, Arsalan. He was back. Older, weaker, his health failing again. Life had come full circle. Haya took a deep breath and told the doctor, "I'll oversee his treatment." When Arsalan saw her, his eyes filled with guilt. "I don't deserve your kindness," he whispered. Haya replied gently, "God tested me through you. That test made me stronger." She made sure he received the best care possible, but never spoke of the past. A few weeks later, Arsalan passed away peacefully. Haya attended his funeral quietly, not as a widow, but as someone who had already let go of pain long ago. After that, she devoted her life entirely to service. Together with Maham, she founded the Haya Medical Foundation, a small organization that offered free healthcare to those who couldn't afford it. People began to call her the healer of hearts. Maham often said, "Mom, you've spent your whole life giving. Isn't it time to live for yourself now?" Haya would smile and reply, "I live for myself every time I bring hope to someone else." Years went by. The foundation grew, spreading to cities across the country. Haya's name became a symbol of compassion and resilience. She was no longer just the nurse who gave away her kidney. She had become a legend of mercy. One evening, sitting in the hospital garden, watching the sunset, Maham turned to her and said, "Mom, you once told me that kindness doesn't change destiny. But look at you, your destiny changed everything." Haya looked at the sky, tears shining in her eyes, and whispered, "Destiny doesn't change, my child. Intention does." The breeze moved softly through the trees, carrying her words into the quiet evening. Somewhere in that moment, the world seemed to pause, as if even the heavens were listening to the story of a woman who gave everything and still had love left to give. Would you like me to continue part 3 next? The chapter where Haya's foundation expands internationally, Maham carries her mother's mission, and the story of the Haya Trust of Hope begins? It's the emotional and powerful legacy part, perfect for ending your US audience story on a high, inspiring note. Years passed like chapters in a book no one wanted to end. Haya grew older, but her eyes still carried that same quiet strength that had once lit dark hospital corridors. Maham, now a young woman full of purpose, had become the heartbeat of their foundation. Together, they traveled to villages, towns, and cities, building clinics and helping the forgotten people of the world one life at a time. Haya no longer needed words to inspire people. Her presence was enough. Wherever she went, people felt peace, like the world paused for a moment just to listen to her silence. Journalists began to write about her, calling her the woman who gave light to the dying. When a television reporter once asked her what kept her going, she simply smiled and said, "I lost everything once, so now I spend my life giving everything back." Maham would often watch her mother speaking to crowds, her soft voice touching heart stronger than any speech could, and she would think, how could one woman carry so much pain and still give so much love? One winter evening, as snow fell outside the foundation headquarters, Haya sat by the window holding an old photograph. It was of her and Arsalan back when life was still simple. She didn't cry, she just whispered, "Thank you for teaching me strength. I forgave you long ago." Just then Maham entered the room and said, "Mom, the World Health Organization invited us to New York. They want to honor you for your lifetime service." Haya looked up, her eyes calm and warm, and said, "No, my dear, they are honoring all the patients who taught me what real courage is." A few weeks later, they were in America, standing in front of an audience full of doctors, leaders, and journalists. When Haya stepped onto the stage, the hall went silent. She didn't have a speech. She just began to speak from her heart. She said, "I was once a nurse who believed healing only happened in hospitals, but life taught me healing begins when we choose to forgive even the ones who broke us." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and crying at the same time. Maham stood beside her with tears streaming down her face, realizing her mother had become more than a healer. She had become hope itself. After the ceremony, Haya and Maham walked through Central Park, the lights of New York glowing around them. Maham said softly, "Mom, this city is full of dreams, and one of them just came true." Haya smiled, looking at the stars, and said, "Dreams don't come true, my love, they grow with us like trees watered by pain and patience." Years later, when Haya's health began to fade, she never complained. She would sit in her chair near the window of their clinic, watching children play outside. She would often say to Maham, "When I am gone, don't mourn me, just keep giving kindness like air that never ends." The day she passed away, the whole foundation stood still, candles lit across hospitals and clinics around the world. In her memory, Maham renamed the foundation the Haya Trust of Hope. It became a global movement, helping thousands of lives every day. One evening years later, Maham visited her mother's grave in Pakistan, the sky golden and soft. She whispered, "Mom, we did it. Your light didn't fade. It just found more hearts to live in." And for a moment, a soft breeze brushed her face, like her mother's gentle hand, reminding her that some souls never leave. They just become the light we keep following. Years went by, and Maham carried her mother's dream like a flame that never went out. She turned the Haya Trust of Hope into an international movement. Hospitals in Africa, Asia, and the United States began to adopt their model of free care, inspired by one woman's kindness. One morning, Maham stood on a stage in Washington, surrounded by people who had come to celebrate the foundation's 25th anniversary. She looked around and said, "My mother believed healing begins with forgiveness. She proved that love is the only medicine that never expires." The crowd stood in silence, then applauded for several minutes. After the ceremony, a young girl approached Maham. She was maybe 10 years old, holding a small photo of Haya. She said quietly, "Your mother saved my brother's life. We didn't have money, but your clinic treated him for free." Maham knelt down, hugged the girl, and whispered, "That's what she wanted for the world. Every time you smile, you keep her alive." Months later, Maham decided to make a documentary about her mother. She called it The Woman Who Gave Light. It began with old footage of the small hospital where Haya once worked, her soft voice playing in the background, saying, "Kindness is the only language the sick can understand." The film showed her journey from pain to purpose, from losing everything to giving everything. The documentary went viral. Millions of people across the world watched and wept. Some started volunteering. Others opened clinics in her name. One day, Maham received a letter from a woman in Brazil. It said, "I never met Haya, but because of her I forgave the man who ruined my life, and I feel free for the first time." Maham held the letter close to her heart and whispered, "Mom, your light reached where even I couldn't reach." Years later, when Maham grew old, she would often visit the same garden where her mother once sat. She would sit under the same tree, close her eyes, and feel the wind on her face. She would whisper, "Mom, I Kept your promise, kindness, never stopped one. Evening as the sun set and golden light filled the garden, she felt something in the air, a calmness, like a familiar presence. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and she smiled, knowing her mother was still there, not in body, but in every breath of hope around her. The next morning the staff found her sitting peacefully under the tree, a soft smile on her face, and the wind still moving gently through her hair. They said it felt like the world had paused for a moment to honor the end of a story that never truly ended. The foundation continued under her students, her legacy living on in every heart healed by love. And somewhere far beyond the clouds, Haya and Maham walked side by side, smiling as the world below kept whispering their story, the healers of hearts. Years later, the Haya Foundation had become one of the most trusted names in humanitarian care. It wasn't just about hospitals anymore, it was about hope. Schools, clinics, and programs across the world carried her name. Volunteers wore a small silver badge shaped like a heart with a single word engraved on it, Haya. It meant life in Arabic, and that was what she had given to so many, a life worth living. One winter evening during an award ceremony at the United Nations, a woman stood on stage to honor the legacy of Haya and Maham. She said the world measures success by wealth, but these women measured it by how many lives they could lift. Their kindness was a revolution in silence. People from different countries, different faiths, and different colors stood together and applauded, not for fame, but for faith in humanity. Outside the building, the snow was falling softly, lights reflected on the ground like stars that had come down to listen in that moment. Somewhere beyond the noise of the city, the wind carried a whisper, two souls smiling from the heavens, proud of what love had built. Because love never dies, it only changes form. It becomes air that heals, hands that help, and hearts that forgive. One quiet night, the hospital lights dimmed, and the halls were empty. Haya sat by the window where she had once watched the rain years ago. Now her hair carried threads of silver, but her eyes still glowed with that same soft fire. She could hear faint laughter from the children's ward, echoes of life she had helped create. She closed her eyes for a moment and felt the wind touch her face. It was gentle, warm, almost familiar, as if the universe itself whispered, "You have done enough." Her heartbeat slowed, but her soul felt lighter than ever. In that final breath, she smiled, not with sadness, but peace, because she knew her life had been a bridge between pain and healing. The next morning, the sun rose golden over the city. Her daughter Maham stood before the foundation building, now bearing her mother's portrait. She said to the crowd, "This is not an end. This is a beginning. For every person who carries her name in their heart is a spark of her light, and that light will never fade." As the wind moved through the trees, the world seemed to bow in silence to a woman who had turned suffering into strength and love into eternity.